So hello and welcome to this, my first ever video blog. So the idea is I will keep them quite short because let's face it, if someone showed me a video on YouTube of the real Santa Claus, I'd probably still lose interest after a couple of minutes, which is fair enough. So thanks for joining us on this most unexpected of journeys which we've been on for a couple of years now. Now I know there are many people who are on life limited journeys and far too many people with cancer. But I think what makes our journey a little bit unusual is the amount of people that are on it with us and the amount of love that we're surrounded by. So thank you very much for being part of that. To be honest, without you all, I don't think I would be here or anywhere else now for that matter. So throughout the journey, the one thing that has puzzled me amongst the many things that have puzzled me is that why we never given answers that are easy to understand. We are given answers by these wonderful experts, but they always seem to have caveats or are a little bit unclear or a bit blurred on the edges. And the conclusion I've come to is that these journeys are far more psychological than they are physical. And they're dependent on the personality of the person who's having the journey and how they interact with everyone around them and their personalities and their mental approaches. And I think that's why it's so difficult, because that's why everyone's journey is unique. I'll give you an example of how this sort of psychological approach has affected me in the last couple of weeks. I've been ill again, unfortunately. What transpired to be bleed number 5. Not that I'm counting. I went down to London to lecture for some junior magicians at the Magic Circle and had the most wonderful of days. During my lecture, after 30 minutes, I became unable to stand. And after the lecture, I then sat down and was fine, but after the lecture in my dressing room I got quite upset. You see, at that point I had no idea why I'd losing energy. I'd got no symptoms of a bleed at that point. So I concluded that that was my lot, that I would never be able to perform standing up again, that simply everything must be closing in. And I got really upset by it. Now let's just examine that for a second. I got really upset because I wasn't able to stand. Now, of course, you know where this is going. There's lots of people who can't stand. So what gives me the right to be able to stand? But more importantly, one of my all-time heroes in magic some years ago was struck down by progressive MS. And he could no longer stand, but still worked superbly. And now his body has all but left him. But the person is still there, as sharp and prolific as ever. I don't know him, he's a hero in magic, he's not someone I know, but I believe him to be very positive and as strong-willed as he ever was. So what gives me the right to moan about not being able to stand? It's a bit pathetic, isn't it? Well, it is, unless you perhaps put it into the context of what this video blog is about. And that is, as I've said, I think these journeys are far more psychological than they are physical. And what was upsetting me, and the penny only dropped on the train on the way home, that obviously the landscape of the journey was changing. And it was probably getting towards its final destination. Inability to stand, tiredness and now breathlessness when I'd got no apparent reason. So I think that is an important point, and it's certainly one that I've taken on board, because we have things in common with many other people, but our reactions may often be different. And people say, oh, it's understandable. Well, it perhaps is understandable, but it's only understandable when you put it into the context of how it relates to all those around you, because it isn't just one person's personality that's at play here, it's everyone's. And I've said before that cancer can bring out a strong, almost superhuman version of the person that simply wasn't there before. But I don't think the person suffering from the condition fundamentally changes. If they were testing before they had it, they're probably going to be testing now, or in my case, a bit silly, as my wife often comments. But something happened at the Magic Circle, which I want to leave you with and finish this video blog. And that is, two of the young people came to talk to me. They were about 10 years old, were quite sort of stature even for 10, and one said to me, I do magic to stop bullies at school. And I thought that was quite sweet. I said, yes, that will work, obviously. I said, but keep it as a life skill, because you may encounter bullies long after you've left school. And he looked at me and he said, do you get bullied? Now obviously he didn't know I work in event management or the world of security. How could he? But I said, yes, I do encounter them, but I've got a way of dealing with them. And I took out my phone and I showed him a picture of my lead doorman, Corbo, a beautiful man, a wonderful, caring man who, if the need arises, can still dislocate you. And I showed the one young gentleman this picture and he said, he's a big unit, isn't he? I bet he could cause some damage. And he then showed the picture to his mate and his mate just looked and said, does he collect debt? And I said, no, he doesn't. He said, oh, that's a shame because there's a kid at school who owes me a right wedge. 10. I do wonder. I really do. So that concludes our first video blog. I hope some of it at least made sense. I must admit I really enjoyed recording it. I shall try and do them as I've done this one as a single take, so there might be some humming and ahhing as we go. But you know, things could be worse. They're not. So as I always say, mustn't grumble and onward and upward. There's just one thing to work out now, which I always have problems with, how to turn this off.